Okay, well,
Oh,
welcome to all to History Matters and So Does Coffee. I've got a great episode here today, the 100th episode of History Matters, which is to a large degree due to you folks being here and making it a community. But before I continue, I turn to my partner in crime, Grace, who will explain the rules of the game.
okay, everyone, welcome. We're so excited to have you with us here today for the 100th episode of History Matters, and so does coffee. Many of you have been here for most of these episodes. It's been a wild 100 weeks. A lot has happened, and Joanne has helped us make sense of all of those things through the lens of history, and we are so grateful for that. And of course, and even today, we have a celebratory day, our 100th episode, but also we have some various things, important things to talk about that Joanne's going to put in historical context. So we're so grateful that she's here, and we're so grateful for you all who have been here for this whole time. And Joanne, if it's all right with you, I would propose that we end our questions a little bit early because we do have some folks in the audience who would like to bring you some special messages. And
Okay.
I believe a lot of folks would like to see you and be seen and wave a little bit. So we will stop a little bit early
Okay.
for those who want to bring messages of good wishes to Joanne and to thank her for all the work that she's done. In the meantime, we do have important history to discuss. So please chat in the chat. You all are excellent chatters, but we also want you to be putting in your questions and answers. Please put the questions in the Q&A section at the bottom of your screen, and I will read those out to Joanne. I think lots of you will have lots of important questions today. So with that, I'm going to hand it back to Joanne, and we're very excited to hear what you have to say.
Okay, and I will also say, Grace, I will be led by you, since you are the woman in charge of questions, that whenever you end the questions, I'll be happy to swing right along with that. So
I will call it at an appropriate point.
Okay.
And then we're going to have to continue with the after party because I think there are going to be a lot of questions too. So it's going to be a busy day. It'll be great.
Okay, it's all good. Okay. Good morning, everybody. Those of you who are here and have been here before do know that usually it is Thursday before I decide on my final topic for Friday, and then very guiltily start advertising it everywhere to make it clear to everyone what I'm going to talk about. This week it was early, and kind of not on purpose. I actually was thinking about a variety of other things, some of them shaped, as the topic suggests, by contemporary news issues. And once I decided or began thinking about this, it was very clear that this is what I needed to talk about. As a matter of fact, I will also be writing about it. So this conversation will help move me in that direction. And you will hear why when I talk about it and what this topic suggests to me. So as advertisers, I have to close chat because you were just too totally, okay, there, now I can focus on what's going on here. So as I suggested when I talked about on Twitter, the topic that I wanted to discuss today, what I was thinking about when thinking about what I would talk about today was the French Revolution and Ukraine and what Americans thought and how they were behaving in relation to the French Revolution and what that might tell us about what's going on now with the United States and Ukraine. And actually, I think it has a number of things to tell us, and one of them I think is quite significant. But first, I wanted to describe, someone just said bingo. If those of you who are here new, there's an ongoing game of bingo based on what I say, and we're like 2 minutes into this episode, so I'm entirely too predictable in the words that I use. But at any rate, do me a favor here. Imagine a war in which you have, it's not in the United States, you have people fighting against an old world restrictive top-down regime. Imagine that you have Americans glorying in that fight, seeing it as people fighting for our cause, sharing our ideology. Consider, if you will, the more conservative party, even though those words are problematic when you're talking about all of American history, the more conservative party fears what's going on in this other country. They see it as a potential threat that might counter the ideology and energy and ultimately top-downness of their desired regime. The more liberal party, put all of that in quotation marks, rejoices in what they're seeing in this other country and what it represents. They see their ideology and spirit spreading around the globe. Eventually, people begin wearing a certain color to register their support of the cause. And that war, clearly, given everything that I've said here, polarizes the nation even more than it already was, although it was already pretty polarized. There's a social component to what's going on here, because that what's going on encourages people to think more sweepingly about involvement in politics. More people are getting involved in politics. What does this say about women? What does this say about Black Americans? There's a social dynamic to what we're seeing going on overseas as well. It's an important point in American history and in America's struggle over how democracy works and what it is in the United States. That's America and the French Revolution. A top-down regime, people fighting against it, America's glorying in it, wearing a certain color. There was a certain color cockade ribbon that you wore to show that you were in support of the French Revolution, and another color that you wore to show that you were not a big fan of it. The Federalists feared it, saw social upset, saw their hierarchical view of society being threatened. The Republicans rejoiced in it and saw it as a victory for American ideology spreading around the world. The nation became even more polarized. It already certainly was, Federalist versus Republican. Now, this foreign affairs are really polarizing the nation even more, which leads to another significant point, which is that at the time, foreign affairs or foreign relations and domestic politics were not two separate categories, as I think we so often assume about American politics, that somehow there's like diplomatic stuff happening over here and domestic things happening over here, which I think, as we're seeing now, is not the case, but certainly was not the case in early America. They were bound up together. Everyone knew that, and everyone assumed that whatever was happening in our relations with other countries was going to have a deep and profound impact, and already was, on what was going on in the United States. You had women and Black Americans becoming involved in politics very self-consciously, in a way, an active way that they perhaps had not been before. And most significantly, you had the United States in the late 1790s was undergoing a really one of many defining moments in the state of democracy in the United States. Often when I talk about the 1790s, one of the things that I say is, in many ways, it was a struggle over how democratic, small d, this new government would be. The Federalists were less comfortable with active, politicized Americans. They wanted people to basically put people into office and then step back and get out of the way. And if they didn't like what was happening, they could vote differently in a different election. The Republicans, partly due to their ideology and partly due to the fact that they were out of power and wanted to be in power, but for both reasons, very much wanted an active populace. Were cheering on things that looked more democratic. We're cheering on, there's all kinds of, I'm sure some of you are thinking about all of the Thomas Jefferson quotations in which he's talking about what's going on in France and cheering it on as a sign that American ideas about liberty and democracy are spreading around the world, and that will help cement democracy in the United States. So what you have in the late 1790s is what some people see as this grand freedom struggle for the sake of democracy is a little problematic, but still a more democratic mode of government. And they're linking America's fate to that. They're seeing that what happens over there can profoundly shape what happens in the United States. People are bound up in it. There are all kinds of public demonstrations and parades. People are, as I said, are wearing this certain color ribbon maybe not blue and yellow, but still to show, actually red, white, and blue, I believe, for France, to show that they support the French revolutionary cause. There's violence, actually, in the case of the French Revolution that's alarming to many and complicates matters, because some people remain firm and say, you know, well, of course there has to be violence for the sake of democracy. Jefferson is someone who liked to make that sort of statement. Federalists are not making that sort of statement. But what's striking to me, and this is what struck me when I was thinking about the topic, I was actually sitting on a train headed into New Haven, and I was trying to think of a way to connect history with what's going on in Ukraine. And that is when it dawned on me that we've already had a moment in American history that was about democracy at a moment when the United States was deciding in some way or another how democratic it would be, that this foreign controversy became a major part of what was going on in the United States, profoundly shaped domestic politics in a lot of different ways, really shook up the people in power, the Federalists, many of whom understood that what they were seeing was not the way that they could stay in power, polarized the nation to an extreme degree. Think about the similarities, and the more you think about it, the more striking it becomes that we are in this moment, and none of what I'm going to say here is new, but I think it's all highly significant compared to what I just said. We are in this moment. We're watching this struggle. We're cheering for Ukraine. We see this as democracy versus authoritarianism, rightly so. We're wearing a particular color to show that we support that cause. There are already protests and demonstrations in support of Ukraine happening. Another factor that I haven't mentioned, the United States government was not totally sure what to do in relation to France. What government was the real government? If there was a revolutionary government that was stepping in, was that a government that should be treated with? What did it mean? The United States declared neutrality and kind of held back to see what happened, which in and of itself was very controversial. By many, it was seen as the United States not stepping up and helping their friends, their allies, and ultimately their saviors who had helped the United States win the revolution. Think about all of those similarities, and it becomes fascinating to think about how this foreign struggle, in both cases, becomes a struggle about democracy at a moment when the United States is in turmoil in some ways about democracy. It becomes another place, in a sense, an easier way, not for the Ukrainians or the French, but for Americans to engage in that kind of dialogue, to have that kind of argument. It's other people, even though the argument is fundamentally the same, and it's very apparent, based in part on what Ukrainians themselves are doing and saying, not to mention their president, who is very effectively using social media. Pardon me here, folks. I'm so excited by this, I'm losing my voice. Who is using social media to make that link explicit. Democracy, the world, here we are, support us. In the case of the French Revolution, at one point you have citizen Edmond Genet, who comes over from France, and it sweeps his way through the United States with people celebrating him as a sort of great hero of what's going on in France. The similarities are striking, but what's particularly interesting and striking to me is that what's going on in Ukraine and France becomes a counter space to have a very domestic political debate, not necessarily in a totally self-conscious way, but in a really obvious way, right? So Federalists are afraid of losing control, and they see what's happening in France as something that might lead to that. Look, Hamilton particularly is sort of screaming about the contagion of what's going on in France and the disorder and the upset and the fact that it's a social revolution. It's not even just a political revolution. The Federalists are howling about the fact that that's what's going on overseas is about upsetting power. And the people who don't necessarily have power at that moment are praising it to the stars, because what they're seeing is people claiming, and by people I mean that a people, not those in power, but a people fighting for and claiming power to govern themselves. It's democracy versus authoritarianism, though those words would not have been used in the same way in early America. Same dynamic, same useful way in which these foreign wars or conflicts become Americanized in American rhetoric, so that they're fighting their own fight at the same time. To me, that's it's a fascinating comparison. Partly also fascinating because of the ways in which it really polarizes the United States in the 1790s, Federalists versus Republicans. John Adams, when he refers to this period and what's going on in the streets, I think I probably mentioned this at some point in the 100 episodes we've had. He refers to it, he uses the word terrorism. I think Jefferson, in one way or another, this is from their letters in their old age. And I think Jefferson is being Jefferson and making a sort of democracy sort of a statement in which he's saying, what a wonderful thing we've seen, France, America, democracy succeeding, and what a wonderful thing it is. And Adam says, yeah, that's really nice, but I don't know if you remember what it felt like at the time I was president, right? And he talks about being terrified because there was all of this drama in the streets and the people were polarized and fighting each other, and there was all of this upset and there was violence, and Americans were angry about the fact that other Americans weren't supporting France. And he says something along the lines of, Mr. Jefferson, I don't know if you ever thought about the fact that my servants in my house armed themselves in case they needed to protect me because of what was happening in the street. And then he says, and I think this is a direct quote, what think you of terrorism, Mr. Jefferson? So this may seem like an antiquated, I think as so much early American history seems, this sort of antiquated, the age of revolution moment when people are talking about kings, and somehow or other it feels very distant from the present. It is not very distant from the present. But here's the most crucial part, the important part to me, and this is why it's important to discuss today, and also why it's in line with a lot of what I have been saying for 100 weeks and needs to be thought about. What happened during the age of the French Revolution is that the American people saw what was going on and were energized by it, cheered it on, immediately understood and translated it into having American significance. And the American people spoke up in favor of it. At the end of this period of conflict, there was a presidential election of 1800. The American people took back the government for this cause. So part of the point that I want to make here is think about the dynamics of what I'm talking about here. Something going on in another country, although it's bloody and certainly by no means safe for the people undergoing it, for us here in America, we can sort of look over there and decide how much we want to engage with it. It's a safe way for us to be ultimately talking about democracy. What do we think it is? How much do we want to defend it? How comfortable are people with it? And is it possible that the American people, because they're looking through different eyes, through a different lens, can see democracy struggling to survive overseas and translate that into what's going on in the United States and politic and vote on behalf of what they see and what they understand? That's the point that I want to make, is that we are, and have been as long as we have been doing this podcast, we are in the midst of a crisis of democracy. How democratic a nation will this be? how much can we rely on what should be fundamental rights like voting or free speech, freedom to protest, fundamental rights that are the foundations of democracy? How much can we rely on those things, and to what degree will things be restructured so that in either sneaky or straightforward or both ways, those things are taken away from us? And for years, and particularly now where it's become so blatant, given that we're leading up to an election in the fall, we've been watching it happen. We've been arguing about it. I've been appearing here first Thursday and then Fridays mornings, pleading for people to realize the danger that democracy is in, but we've been watching things move along. And now Americans and people all over the world are riled up because of what Russia is doing to Ukraine. America is seeing the world unite to defend Ukraine. They're understanding, because Russia is such an extreme version of authoritarianism, they're understanding in a different, I think, guttural way, what it means to see democracy crushed, because they're watching someone try to do it. And that has power, and that's energizing Americans, and that matters. Because I truly think that if Americans understand in their gut, not just in a kind of ethereal, polarized, fist-waving way, but in their gut, what it means to have democracy, to lose democracy, and what it means to see democracy imperiled, what it means to see democracy threatened, that could shape public opinion to a degree where it matters. So I'm not saying we should just think about the Ukraine as something symbolic. How nice, that's what's going on over there. I am saying on the other, sort of to counter that, the opposite of that, it matters so much to them and to us that it's worth thinking about, that it can shape domestic understandings among us Americans about our fight as well as their fight. And it might move people to think differently and act differently. And it might lead to shifts in real power. If people understand in their gut what they're seeing, the direness of it, the impact of it, the implications of it, and how that might happen here. I've been saying forever, for 100 weeks, we get lost in American exceptionalism. Of course, it can't happen here. We're the United States, right? That sort of stuff doesn't happen here. We're better, and we have this wonderful, sophisticated democracy that can't happen here. And I've said in a variety of different ways, that's foolish thinking. That's trusting in exceptionalism to the point that you're not looking at what's going on. And the fact of the matter is, and here I'm going to say the word that's going to give a lot of people bingo: contingency, right? The very first episode of History Matters, the theme was contingency. We don't know what's going to happen. I think a lot of people still don't realize the degree to which that is true, the degree to which there can be hyper dramatic, extreme change in the nature of the United States, even beyond where we are, because there's no telling where we're going to move. Is authoritarianism going to sweep in? Will our rights be basically pulled back, either directly or in sneaky ways, so that we might still think we're carrying out the forms of democracy, but they don't matter? That could happen. We're not so special that that can't happen. Or are we going to actually stand up and acknowledge what's happening, see what's happening, and move to make things better for democracy, defend democracy, because we'll understand the real seriousness and nature of what it means to be in a moment of extreme contingencies. I've said way too many times, probably for you. At any rate, I will stop hyperventilating, but clearly this has a powerful message to me and an important message to me, because I'm watching the United States and the world respond to what they're hearing and what they're seeing. And thanks to technology and social media, they are hearing and seeing it directly. And granted, there's all kinds of propaganda floating around, but the fact of the matter is we are seeing and experiencing in a very different way this war from many that we've seen or experienced before. And because it is to many people a different kind of war, meaning, and this is a hyper racist conversation, but the racism of it matters. This is a civilized country. What does that mean? What that means on a superficial level is that some people around the world, including some Americans, suddenly can see themselves in it in a way that they could not do or would not do when countries that in their mind seem further removed have people that are browner in them, or governments that, you know, that seem more different, are speaking a different language, ways in which Americans have seen what's happening in these other countries and have felt bad about it, but have not seen it as something that affects them personally. This, they can see themselves in. Gets back to a dynamic that I've also talked about in the past. I talked about the fight over eliminating slavery. And I talked about how John Quincy Adams, after his presidency, when he goes back to Congress to serve in the House, not even the Senate, the House, one of the things he realizes, and he plays it for full force, is that he could stand up and yell about how bad slavery is and that it needs to be overturned. He's going to get a much better response from Northerners if he stands up and says, your right of petition is being violated. Your rights are being violated. It has to do with slavery, but you don't even have to think about the slavery part. Your rights are being violated. And sure enough, that gets a lot of Northerners very upset. In a sense, that's some of what we're seeing here. Wait a minute, they're like us. That like it's happening to them and they're like us. How is that possible? It changes mind frames, right? It reframes understandings of possibilities and contingencies. For all of these reasons, I think it's so important to think about what's happening there and how we are understanding it here and what that means and how that can change minds, and that we can think about that, we can write about that, we can teach about that, we can talk about that, that is something that we should have a conversation about, very broadly speaking, for the sake of democracy. We are watching a struggle over democracy. It matters. It matters there, and it matters here. Okay, I got very riled up. Come down, bring the energy level down. But I obviously feel this very strongly. And it was kind of wonderful that my 100th episode, I get to come back to contingency and democracy, which basically have been the driving forces behind all of the public-minded work that I've been doing over the last several years. Okay, now I see, or at least already saw mug. Okay, don't know if there are folks here who are new, but if there are, every week I have a mug that is thematically related to whatever I'm talking about. And this week, I got two gifts of mugs, and one of them I'm going to use because it's particularly on target. The other one, and I won't thank the person until I use it. He knows who he is. I will use shortly in another week because it deserves its own spotlight. But for today, how can I not use this? It's the celebratory 100th episode mug with all of these. And I love the fact that someone put beak boop. Is that Carol Lee? You put beak boop. But, you know, contingency, yay, history. I haven't gotten to the poof yet, but I will. Accountability. I didn't say that, but now I did. I could just read this and you'll all get bingo. But at any rate, this is wonderful, and equally wonderful is, of course, what it says on the back. Thank you for engaging in democracy every Friday morning. It always matters. It always matters. This community always matters, and that this is happening right now, where world events are so important to the world and to us, it matters even more. So I get to say that through this mug, which I thank you for. And I get to sort of make the ultimate message at a moment when it matters. So thank you for the gift and for the opportunity it gives me to point to this after having given comments that are directly on this topic. So thank you.
And Carolee and Annie have been instrumental in making sure that all of these items were available and perfect, and
So now
that you
Carolee
got
and
one.
Annie, are you the ones who designed the mug, made the mug?
I think Carolee, you designed the mug. Annie weighed in on many of the other
Yeah, I
decisions
was
as
going to
well.
say
They've
Carolee
both
and
been
Annie, I know are like
deeply
the
involved in
leaders.
planning here. Did you get your other items as well, Joanne?
Well, I did receive this item.
Yay.
I did receive my history newbie t-shirt, which I didn't have a necklace on because I thought newbie would be the necklace, but then when I sat down, I realized, darn, he doesn't show. But I did receive this, which makes me beyond happy. And I get to wear it for this episode is wonderful. So that is what I have received.
Excellent. Well, and again, thank you to Carolee and Annie for making all that happen. And we're happy that you get to celebrate and that there is a mug to commemorate this very important occasion, both on the hooray celebratory level and the very serious. It's wonderful that everyone is here engaging in democracy and that you've been leading them. So thank you. And really amazing connections today. It was
I swear I was on the train going,
yeah.
oh, and this morning was when I thought, oh, what this is actually about is Americans understanding for the first time, for a variety of good and bad reasons, what it means for democracy to be attacked and that it might matter, right? It made a difference. In 1798, 1799, Americans were like, democracy. Okay, now I need to take myself down again because clearly I'm very excited. Democracy.
There's like 87 people out there who also just raised their hands in the air and yelled democracy. Awesome.
Good.
And it made watching the State of the Union after having heard your presentation last week was much more informative for me. And I did in the corner of my brain, I was going, oh, people are wearing stuff on their shirts. And then after, and I kind of got it, but then once you tweeted that you were talking about the French Revolution, I went, oh, cockades.
Exactly.
Oh, I get
it. We're seeing it, right? I am. And then you have, people who are wearing it sincerely and other people who are sort of sticking it on because it's smart to stick it on. I when I was researching this morning for specific examples of things, I found, among other things, and I can't remember whose work it is, might be Ashley White, who described how people going to France at a certain time carried the right color cockade with them so that when they would get off the boat in France, they could put it on. So it wasn't necessarily a sincere belief, but it was, oh man, I better be on the right side of the tracks when I'm in France. But still, you're right. The similarities are really striking. And the fact that we're in a crisis of democracy then and now, and that public opinion matters, and that maybe this will get Americans to think differently and think more aggressively. I have hope.
It's a very, very interesting time, and we do have lots of good questions here. And again, we're going to stop questions a little early for some greetings. But so Tom wants to know if you've ever read Gouverneur Morris's diary from the French Revolution. And if you have thoughts on that.
I have. So Gouverneur Morris is an interesting character. He's a Federalist. He's a friend of Hamilton's. He's not thrilled with what he sees on the ground in France. He is not thrilled with the disorder and the chaos and the bloodshed. And he's writing home, in addition to writing in his diary, about what he sees, what he thinks about it. It's really interesting. Now, I will say, and I don't know if there's a modern edition of it. The edition of Morris's diary that I've read is a 19th century or late 19th century edition, I believe. And a lot of the published papers of founder folk and almost founder folk that are published in the 19th century are inaccurate because they're published, edited and published by sons or grandsons who make them cleaner and nicer than they might otherwise be. So I don't know whether there's a more modern, more truthful edition. I don't know the degree to which the one I saw actually isn't truthful, but it's really fascinating eyewitness discussion of what's going on by someone who is not thrilled. Again, the Federalists were in power and they could see and were terrified about what that meant, because democracy in that sense was not going to be friendly to the Federalists. Again, the similarity is really interesting.
Thank you.
Look at you guys spreading links.
Yeah. Miranda wants to know, is there a historical figure we'd be able to connect to President Zelensky in order to understand the pressures and troubles he's facing? And also, he's an interesting character right now. Are there any historical parallels?
He's an interesting character. I mean, I'm always really particularly fascinated by the use of technology and how it fundamentally changes politics. So watching him appeal to the world on behalf of his cause, but also on behalf of larger causes, is really striking. It's just a different way of engaging. I was thinking about that in the case of the French Revolution, as far as someone who people have taken to heart and are cheering for. You know, there were two, and one of them is Citizen Genet, who Americans were cheering on. The government was not very thrilled about. The other was Lafayette, who was engaged in the French Revolution, who, again, hero of the American Revolution, beloved Lafayette. And so he certainly would have been cheered on. So there's not a direct equivalent, but there are seeming champions of what's going on in France that many Americans took on and cheered for what they were doing.
And it seems like it helps to have sort of a face.
Yeah, for sure.
Not just an idea.
Although the killing of the king obviously terrified many people, but also it might not have been a person to cheer, like a face, but it was an event that was so powerful that in a way that also was not just an idea anymore.
Sure.
So.
All right. James wants to know, what impact, if any, did facing invasion in the War of 1812 have on American political divisiveness that had existed up to that point?
Oh, well, I mean, in part, the War of 1812, it didn't absolutely destroy the Federalists, but it came close. The Federalists, so again, if you think about the Federalists are England friendly and the Republicans are France friendly, and now you have in the quasi-war, it's against France, and now War of 1812, it's against England. So the Federalists are already, they're having a problem with what it means to go to war with England. The Republicans are in control. Jefferson is in control. Madison is in control. Maybe Jefferson at this point isn't. Madison is. And so the opposition is in control, and Federalists can see like the economy is beginning to suffer. There's all kinds of stuff going on that's alarming Federalists. It's partly the War of 1812 and all of the ways in which they see the Federalist cause sinking and the Republican cause not sinking, that they come up with the Hartford Convention, right? They're like, you know what? We are going to demand some amendments to the Constitution because this is all not fair. And they think that, they don't rouse the public. They're the Federalists. Of course they don't arouse the public, but they have this, secret convention where they come up with these suggestions for changes that they want. And then they send them to the government. And of course they arrive right around the time when, a triumphant Battle of New Orleans, and it looks like America's winning the war, and the Federalists are like, you know what, we have demands. It doesn't look good for the Federalists, and that really doesn't destroy them forever. They stay true for a little while more on a state level, and particularly in Connecticut, but that does not help them. So, yeah.
Thank you. All right, and we'll do, I think, just one more here. Tim wants to know, does it strike you that there's a dearth of historians at American higher ed institutions with an expertise in Eastern Europe and Russia? Is this something we need to address? And does this particular crisis bring that to a head?
Well, I would say on a more sweeping level, and I was retweeting people on this very question, someone at some point in the last couple days tweeted and said, I think it was LSU contacted the history faculty asking for people who specialize in this part of the world, in Ukraine. And guess what? We don't have someone. I don't know if it's LSU, but it was like, if you peel people away, if you shrink history departments, if you do what's going on now and basically put things down to a bare minimum, guess what? You won't have experts when you need experts. The reason why there is faculty, tenured faculty doing what they do at colleges and universities is partly, and this is, none of this is going to be shocking, but still, I will say it anyway, is partly teacher focused, student focused, learning focused in that way for campus based. And also because universities and colleges support the people doing the research and thinking and writing about topics that shape the United States and the world. And if you assume that, you know, experts are bad, we don't need them, let's just do what we need to keep the schools going, guess what? You're on the brink of a world war and you don't have people who can weigh in and offer you any information on the history behind it, the likelihood of what's going to happen, how the past has shaped the present, all of the things you really need to know at a moment of crisis. So I say democracy, and then I also say, yay, history, because it's a lesson, a dramatic lesson in the ways in which you don't support people who study history in different ways. You don't support people who have expertise in different areas. You assume it's just about students and anyone can do it. Guess what? You blind yourself. You're putting on a blindfold. You do not have information. You're standing in the present with no sense of how you got here, and really dim way of trying to figure out what comes next. And you can, again, you can see that in a very real way right now. So I'm like all worked up.
Thank you. I think we all agree with you. History is incredibly important. And just the past 100 weeks, Joanne, have really emphasized that, have they not?
Yeah. Contingency and democracy.
Absolutely. Well, we do have a number of folks who would like to give you, if you don't mind, would you like, we have some good wishes that folks would like to share with you. I'm going to make a couple people into panelists with us. And
okay. Yeah.
All right. So I think we are going to start with your original partner in crime here. Hopefully he is able to, there we go.
I want to see his face.
He's coming. There we go.
So I'm so happy to see you.
Hello, everybody.
Oh my gosh, it's so good to see you.
And congratulations on Carolee for seeing the tour. Carolee and somebody else were the only two that saw that I did one little comment as we were listening. So.
I have not been following, but I of course people will notice that. This is the History Matters community. Oh Matt, it's so good to see you.
It's so good to see you.
With your real background behind you.
Yes, it's a real background. I'm in my office at home today. So and thank you. I just wanted to congratulate you. This is phenomenal. And when when I was thinking, it was 2 years ago that Grace said, "Hey, Joanne wants to do something. Are you interested?" And I said yes, because I was a huge fan before I got to meet you. And I'm just awed by your work here day in, day out, or week in, week out. This is just phenomenal.
Thank you, Matt. And we are here in part because of you, my partner in crime. So I'm really glad you're here.
Thank you.
Okay, now I'm like, Annie. Oh, okay, I'm not gonna I'm gonna get verklempt. I almost teared up when Matt came on. I know. Oh, Matt, I'm so pleased to see you. Carolee! Yay! Okay, this is look at this, you guys.
Okay, I have on my Yay History shirt. I have the long sleeve and Carolee has
I have the short sleeve.
Yay. For those of you who don't know, the 2-second version of Yay History, I was walking around eating an ice cream cone in New York City, and someone passed me by and had my mask off and said, as they passed me by, "Yay, history!" And I kind of looked because I thought, what was that meant for me? And when I turned around, she said, "Yay, history!" So she knew who I was, and yay, history. We've been saying it ever since. So, I see Tom is appearing. You guys leave me in suspense. I'm like, it's Carolee. Where's Carolee? Is Annie? Where's Annie? There you are, Tom. I will also say the idea to do this and see everyone's face was Matt's.
Yep.
You suggested it, and I was like, that won't work. And I was wrong.
There may have been some nerves in coordinating that at some point, but
Yeah. And
fortunately, we have an incredible group of people. So
we do.
Yes.
Matt, where's the Star Wars book? I mean, come on.
I have Nemo today. I have Nemo.
Okay. You could
Just
have
find a happy place.
Was it a sloth? What was the thing that you drank out
Yeah,
of?
the sloth. Yes.
Because I know your mugs.
Yes, which has been moved to the top shelf so that I don't hit my eye every time I drink.
That's yeah. Oh, Tom, hello there.
Joanne.
Yay. Oh my God.
Joanne, I don't know how we live through this pandemic without you.
Well,
I mean, you might find this hard to believe, but I rarely go to bed before 2 a.m., sometimes 3. And so my wife would go, what are you doing? I mean, as a result, I get up rather late. And she would say, what are you doing up so early? And then she finally kicked in. Oh, it's that Friday thing you do. You got me out of bed.
I got you out of bed. Would you
For
say
almost
something?
100 weeks now. Just to listen to this.
I appreciate that. I know how hard it is to get out of bed because I often have a very hard time getting out of bed. And the only thing that gets me is like, but they're waiting. There's something smart to say and I have to be there. Thank you, Tom.
Come on, I mean, this is an amazing community. You got Annie and Carolee who are just off the charts.
It's an amazing
people in the chat. There's no shortage of great people, but and Matt did an amazing job. Grace continues to do an amazing job. But seriously, do we even come each week if there's not a Joanne? I mean,
And
you're incredible.
Oh.
I mean, I had you up on the upper, the A list as just as a historian for years. And then you start doing this and I find out about you as a person. I think we all have. I mean, we've learned so much about you.
Thank you. Yeah. Okay. So now you've officially moved me into the crying. So
I apologize.
thank you.
Tim is defining verklempt in the chat for those of you who are not familiar.
Okay.
Thank you, Tim.
Thank you.
I mean, how do you not love somebody who swears on PBS?
That was not officially on my bucket list because I never imagined it could be. But then after I did it, it became a bucket list thing that I swore on PBS and got bleeped.
And she's like the only historian who's a meme and a GIF.
And that makes me stupidly happy is what that does. So yeah. Wait, someone just said the swearing on PBS is the entire reason I became a fan. You guys are the most amazing community, I have to say. I've been bragging about you guys for 100 episodes because I keep saying to people, you don't understand. These people, they come every week to engage in democracy, right? They want to hear and talk about this moment and talk about history and talk about the importance of history in the present. And that matters so much. It matters so much generally. And it matters so much to me that, you guys helped me a lot throughout the last 100 episodes, because the fact that you came here every week for this, talk about hope. I mean, that's like the definition of hope, is that we're here doing this consistently all of that time. So I thank you guys for doing that and for being such an amazing community, which you have always been and are.
Well, Joanne, can I just also say that, as a father of daughters, to have you as a role model in a public way for them, showing the capacity and what it means to be empathetic and brilliant and working towards things it's really powerful. And I know there's a lot of little girls out there who see you as a role model, and I do appreciate that.
And now I'm just past for Clemson.
That's pretty.
That might be
probably
the
quite
nicest
true.
thing.
I will do jazz hands. We'll get over it.
Jazz hands.
Annie, your turn.
I was just gonna say, right around the time that the pandemic started was when y'all were ending Backstory. And I was having, emotions about that because I was a Backstory fan with my students. We used to stay after school and listen to it when I was getting ready for the next week on Fridays. And then right around the time when I was switching jobs and working with Dr. Ayers, I knew Backstory was ending probably before a lot of other people did. And I was already getting verklempt. But then this all happened and you started this community, and that sort of became my new Backstory, so to speak, my way to interact with history, but also the people involved. So for that, I think is just it filled a huge need for me as a history lover, but also all of us being so isolated, especially those first few months, knowing that we had this to look forward to. And now Dr. Ayers literally says, we can't schedule meetings on Fridays, with the team because Amy has her thing that she does with Joanne. Because I don't quite understand it, but the bird has his own Twitter account. It's hilarious.
Okay, and that also,
we schedule our team meetings now around this because he knows
History bird.
Yep,
the history word, that is.
So
that
thank you for making all of us come together, and Joanne and Grace and Matt, you guys made this community.
Well, thank you, Annie and Carolee too, for being out there in the lead. And Tom, for like master of bingo.
It's expected.
What can I say?
So,
but yeah, I'm just going to keep saying thank you and being increasingly verklempt for a variety of reasons. But
Speaking of bingo, Grace, you have not even addressed your background. I mean, we're breaking weekly
Background
traditions
reveal.
here.
Some people need background revealed for bingo.
Oh, go ahead.
well, so I just want to say, I don't want to talk too much. I do talk too much, but Joanne you asked a lot, like, can one woman make a difference? And I've also said before, my daughter, like, I talk about you and she says, you're addicted. I'm like, of course I'm addicted. She's changed my life. And so I was being mini Joanne, and I was looking back because I remember this episode and I found it. It was on June 4th, 2020.
of course you found it. You're Carolee.
It's Founders Online. I have Joanne Online. So I was looking at it, and in this episode I distinctly remembered where you spoke about a little girl drawing a picture of you, and you're holding a book, and there's a little voice bubble, and it says, I wrote this. And then you said girls need flesh and blood role models who look like them, who use their voices so they can see what the possibilities are. And I'm that little girl. I'm an Asian American woman who never really felt, I loved history, but I never felt part of history. So I was kind of an observer watching it. And but lots of different reasons, and a big reason is you coming to this community. I've always felt very intimidated and shy in history spaces, but you built this community. And in the beginning, I didn't speak up in the chat. Now, like, every week I'm on the video. And the same, and I don't want to make this about me, but I listen to you, you're empathetic, you're fun, you're this friendly historian, because so many historians are not friendly and they don't resonate with me, but you're friendly, you're user friendly, you respond to emails and tweets, and you have this history bird, and all that really speaks to me. And that's why I design mugs, because I do fangirl you. And that you brought so much meaning and understanding to things in the pandemic and things that I didn't understand, and this community that made me feel a part of it and made me feel welcome. And you challenged and you inspired me to use my voice, that one person can make a difference. And I never spoke. I mean, like everyone in the chat, like I talk too much, but I was never like that before. And like I was talking to Grace about, I wrote a blog post about it, about finding my voice and finding you, and it really helped me find that voice. In the same month that you gave that talk, I was asked to write a book. And I'm like, I would have never said yes. And now, now it's out there on Amazon. So, and
wow.
a lot of you, and I do shout out the History Matters community. I do shout you out, Joanne. I'm like, I have to quote Joanne, and you are in there. And so, co-authoring a book, and that's very me, to be collaborative, to be able to share it with my history community, to be part of this. you know, can one woman make a difference? Yes, you show us, Joanne, you can, you inspire, you're empathetic, you care, you speak up for democracy, you give us understanding and meaning. And I take all that to my book and to my community and to Twitter and to my classroom, to my students to have examples of what they can do and aspire to. And you answer them when we tweet at you during Hamilton. So I cannot say thank you enough. So thank you.
Thank you, Carolee. Thank you guys more than I can now say, because I am indeed verklempt, formally verklempt. That pretty much the nicest thing that you can say is that whatever I'm doing here is helping other women learn to have a voice. So thank you for that. I swear to God. Give me jazz hands, Matt. I need some more. Thank you.
And Carolee, now you have a speech bubble. You wrote that, and it has been shared in the chat. We are very proud of Carolee.
Yeah,
Thank you.
that's amazing. I don't know if I knew that or didn't know that actually. So now you are still getting people asking for your background, Grace.
Well, I'll share my background, and then I think we'll, in the after party, we'll bring on all the people who want to be seen, and we'll have a great big party. But I figure we wouldn't do that live because more people might share if we're not live on Facebook. But yeah, so I just have an 1890 photochrome postcard of Kyiv, and
Oh,
yeah, that's cool, right?
it's
It
cool.
really looks nice.
It's cool and perfect.
Yeah. So
cool.
it's a beautiful city, and certainly all our thoughts are there. So I just thought I'd put that up there. And the Library of Congress has incredible photochrome collections. This is, I guess, hand tinted. So check those out. They're cool.
I realize we're running out of time and I have to make my poof speech, but before I make my poof speech, I do want to say 100 weeks ago, I started this because there was a clear political crisis and a clear health crisis, and people were being stuck at home. And I thought, what can I do? Right? What can I contribute? And I saw Yo-Yo Ma playing the cello, and I saw Patrick Stewart reading Shakespeare sonnets, and I thought, okay, my equivalent of that is I can talk about history, and I can make it clear why it matters in this moment. And I did it purely because it was like, what can I do? Right? This is a thing I can do. And what I learned in a very short amount of time is what you guys did in return mattered more than I can say. So you guys have been thanking me for the difference that I made. I have to say, it's right back at you, because the fact that you are here every week on a big, broad, sweeping level, in addition to being on a personal level, really mattered to me and helped me get through the last 100 weeks. So I thank you guys for being such a great community. So history matters, democracy matters, community matters. So thank you for being part of my community. Okay, I now am composed enough. I don't know, Matt, there might be ongoing jazz hands. Thank you very much. Anyway, so now I will say what I am supposed to say at this moment, which is we are now going to segue into the after party. What that means is that we will no longer be recording what's going on here. And I'm really glad we recorded that, because then I can get all of you. As a matter of fact, if someone would please take a picture of this and send it to me, it would make me very happy. We are not going to record anymore. We will stop recording, but we will continue the conversation in, because it's not recorded, a less formal way. We can open things up and have a conversation. If you are beaming in here through the NCHE website, just stay here and poof, this will become the after party. If you are beaming in through Facebook, you will need to leave Facebook and go to ncheteach.org/conversations, and you will immediately be in the after party with the rest of us. So I will stop there, and maybe my last official words on the 100th episode will be thank you.
Thank you, Joanne. We're all so grateful. We'll now shift over so you can hear from even more friends.
I'm saving this chat.